I still remember the sound of the impact, a crunch, a snap, and then silence. That silence followed me for weeks. I'd been working a construction job in Elkhart, Indiana. Nothing glamorous, just lifting beams, hammering nails, sweating through long Midwest summers. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy, but I was proud of what I did. Until the scaffolding gave way beneath me, and I shattered 3 discs in my back. That was the day my life changed, not just because of the injury, but because I saw who my wife really was. Her name was Marlene. Beautiful, yes. The kind of woman who turned heads at the supermarket even in sweatpants. But cold? You wouldn't believe how cold a person can get until they look at you lying in a hospital bed and ask, "So, how are you going to pay for this?" I thought she was joking. I laughed, actually laughed, until I saw she wasn't smiling. "You're not going to be working for a while, are you, Everett?" she said flatly, flipping through her phone. "Guess that makes you kind of useless?" It was like getting hit all over again. I spent weeks in that recliner at home, unable to stand without help, relying on painkillers and grit just to make it to the bathroom. And Marlene? She grew distant, almost offended by my presence. No more goodnight kisses. No more shared dinners. Just a shadow in her own house, whispering on her phone late at night, and vanishing every other weekend with vague excuses about girls' nights and mental space. I wasn't dumb, just broken. Still, I held on. I thought love was about weathering storms. But Marlene, she didn't believe in storms. She believed in clear skies and smooth roads. The moment life demanded patience or compassion, she was already packing her bags. 3 months after the accident, she shoved a folder in my lap. "Divorce papers. You're dragging me down, Everett," she said, arms crossed. I didn't marry a cripple. I married a man who worked. She left that night. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat for days. I just sat in that chair, staring at the dent in the couch where she used to sit. My body ached, but my heart? That was the real injury. And that's when the darkest year of my life began. After Marlene left, silence wasn't just a sound. It was a companion. It clung to the walls, hovered above the floorboards, filled the kitchen where her humming used to live. She didn't just take her clothes or the dog. She took the framed photos of our wedding, the kitschy coffee mugs we bought in Gatlinburg, even the potted succulents she once mocked me for overwatering. But the pain? She left that behind. I stayed in that recliner for weeks. My back still screamed with every movement, and without her, the days blurred together. I watched dust collect on the windowsill where her favorite cactus once sat. It felt symbolic. Something green and alive was gone, and in its place, only dust and emptiness. No friends came to check on me. Marlene had done a great job over the years of isolating me without me even realizing it. It wasn't that people didn't care, it's that she made me so small, so dependent on her, that I had no one left when she walked away. I remember trying to order groceries online. My hands shook so badly I could barely type. I had to watch the delivery guy from the window, ashamed I couldn't make it to the door in time before he rang twice and left the bags on the steps. I crawled, literally, crawled on my elbows and knees to bring in a bag of canned soup. I was sweating and crying when I finally got it to the counter. And I looked around and realized this was my life now. A half-empty house, a broken body, and no one calling to ask if I was still breathing. I checked her social media one night. I shouldn't have, but pain makes you masochistic. There she was, radiant in a red dress I'd never seen before, laughing in some rooftop bar with a guy named Jackson. Yes, Jackson, with an X. Like her new life came with new spelling. The caption said, "Healing looks good on me." Healing? I laughed so hard I nearly dislodged the heating pad from my spine. She was healing? I was the one who couldn't stand without assistance. I was the one whose world had collapsed. And she was drinking margaritas with Mr. CrossFit. But here's the thing. That was the night something snapped. Not in a dramatic, movie montage kind of way. No music played. No light bulb flickered above my head. Just a quiet, bitter realization no one was coming to save me. So maybe I'd have to save myself. The first real winter without Marlene came early and hit hard. There's a strange kind of humiliation in realizing your heating's been off for 2 days because you forgot to pay the bill. Not because you're irresponsible, but because pain has rewired your brain to focus only on survival. I sat there, wrapped in 3 blankets, clutching a bowl of cold oatmeal, staring at the blinking red light on the thermostat like it had betrayed me. The once cozy house felt like a cave now, lifeless, echoey, a graveyard of shared dreams. Every creak of the floor reminded me she wasn't walking down the hallway anymore. Every closed cabinet door was one she used to slam when she was mad about something small, like the way I chewed, or how I folded the towels wrong. You'd think I'd be relieved she was gone. But I wasn't. I missed the fights. I missed the noise. And then came the mold. The guest bathroom had flooded during a storm. I didn't notice. I rarely went in there anymore. One day I opened the door and found the walls streaked with black patches, a fungal masterpiece painted by neglect and decay. That room, like my marriage, had quietly rotted while I lay paralyzed in another corner of the house, too broken to do anything about it. I sat on the toilet lid and stared at the mold like it was a message. This is who you are now, it seemed to say. Forgotten, growing fungus in the dark. I should have called someone. A plumber, a friend, heck, even my neighbor. But I didn't. Instead, I stayed in that bathroom for what felt like hours, watching the slow drip from the pipe, counting each droplet like it was a minute of my life wasted. That night, I had a dream. A weird one. I was standing at the top of a hill, but I wasn't in pain. I was holding a shovel, digging into the earth. And every time I hit something hard, it wasn't rock, it was something golden. Coins, watches, antique rings. Buried treasure, just beneath the dirt. I woke up in a sweat, confused, but something inside me had shifted. Not a miracle. Not some overnight transformation. But maybe, just maybe, I could start digging too. I had an old laptop. I hadn't touched it since before the accident. It was dusty, slow, and booted up with a loud wheeze, kind of like me. But it worked. And buried in an old folder labeled Ideas was a note I wrote to myself years ago. Just one line. One day, sell them your story before they sell you their pity. That was the first time I cried without feeling weak. I wiped my eyes and started typing. I didn't set out to become a writer. Heck, I barely passed English in high school. The only thing I ever really wrote before was grocery lists and half-hearted apology notes to Marlene after a fight I didn't start, but still apologized for, just to keep the peace. But that night, with the cold air biting through the cracks in the window and my spine still seizing in protest, I started typing. It wasn't pretty. My fingers cramped. My back ached. And every sentence I wrote felt like a confession no one had asked for. I wrote about the accident. About lying in that hospital bed staring at the ceiling tiles like they held the answers to why my wife had already checked out emotionally. I wrote about Marlene's silence, her cold detachment, how her perfume lingered in the hallway longer than she ever stayed in a room with me after I got home. I wrote about how it feels to lose your dignity in increments. First your job, then your strength, then your marriage, and finally, your identity. And somehow, people read it. I posted my story on a tiny online blog platform I barely remembered signing up for back in 2011. I called the post, Useless, a memoir in real time. I expected maybe 5 views. Most of them bots. Instead, I got dozens of comments. Then hundreds. Strangers, complete strangers, from all over the country started writing to me. Men who'd been discarded the moment they stopped being providers. Women who'd gone through their own quiet divorces in houses full of noise. People who just needed to hear someone say, yes, this hurts. And no, you're not crazy for feeling broken. I was shocked. And, for the first time in a year, I felt seen. A woman named Laverne from Montana sent me a message that said, you write like you're bleeding onto the page. Don't stop. So I didn't. I wrote every night. Between heating pad shifts and pills, I typed. I told stories I didn't know I had. About my father's silence growing up. About Marlene mocking my dreams of building furniture. About the night she called me a charity case when I asked if she could drive me to physical therapy. I turned every memory into a chapter, every insult into a punchline, every tear into a paragraph. Then something strange happened. A small publisher, small bench press, of all names, reached out. Said they'd been following my blog. Said my voice was raw, urgent, needed. I didn't know how to respond. I thought it was a scam, but it wasn't. They offered a modest advance. Nothing life-changing, but enough to fix the bathroom. Enough to pay the heat. Enough to not feel like a ghost in my own home anymore. The book deal came with a title, The Man She Left in the Recliner. And that's when I realized, Marlene may have left me broken, but she also lit the fire that forged something entirely new. I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a writer, and the world was starting to listen. The day the book came out was quiet. No confetti, no champagne, just me, a slightly crooked back, and a first edition copy of The Man She Left in the Recliner sitting on my front porch like a forgotten package. I held it like it might fall apart if I breathed too hard. I remember running my fingers over the glossy cover. My name, Everett Walcott, printed right there, not in bold, but enough to make me feel like I mattered again. Like I had clawed my way out of the moldy guest bathroom and carved a space for myself in a world that had written me off. And then, a week later, Marlene showed up. Unannounced. Like a memory I tried to evict. I heard the knock while I was halfway through an interview over Zoom. Yes, I was doing interviews now. Local radio, some online platforms. People were fascinated with my story. Not because it was glamorous, but because it was real. Raw. Ugly even. And honest. I opened the door, expecting a delivery. And there she was. Marlene. Still beautiful. Still manicured and styled, and wearing that effortless smugness like it was sewn into her skin. She gave me a smirk that didn't reach her eyes and said, "Well, you look better." I blinked. My mouth went dry. She leaned casually against the porch post like she had every right to be there. "I read your book," she added, eyes scanning the cluttered living room behind me like she was searching for something to criticize. I didn't invite her in. She tried small talk, asked how I was doing, as if the chapters she skimmed hadn't already told her. Then she said it. "I think we should talk. Maybe get dinner sometime. Just clear the air." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was surreal. The same woman who once told me I was dead weight, now standing on my porch like she was dropping by to borrow sugar. The same woman who said, "You're not a man anymore," now wanted to catch up. I didn't say anything, just stepped back and reached inside the door, grabbed a copy of my book, signed it. "To Marlene, thanks for the ending." And then I shut the door. She knocked once more, waited. Eventually, her footsteps faded down the steps, and her perfume, that same floral scent I used to find comforting, vanished with her. But I didn't watch her leave. I turned off my laptop, packed a small duffel, and drove 6 hours north to a cabin I'd rented for a month, just to get away. Because the truth was, I wasn't the man in the recliner anymore. I wasn't even the man she left. I was someone else now, and I didn't owe her a single conversation. The cabin sat at the edge of Lake Minnewa, hidden behind a row of birches that rattled like dry bones in the wind. No neighbors. No internet. No cell signal unless you hiked half a mile up the trail behind the fire pit and held your phone toward the sky like it was a prayer. It was perfect. I brought 3 things with me. My duffel bag, a printed manuscript of the next book I hadn't dared start yet, and my back brace, the one I used to wear like armor, now more habit than necessity. The first few days, I mostly sat, listened, watched. The lake was frozen over, except for a tiny breathing hole near the center. Every morning, it smoked with mist like it was exhaling something it had kept buried overnight. I started walking again. At first, just around the cabin. 10 steps. Then 15. My legs trembled like they were learning a new language. The pain was still there, dull now, less angry. But the more I moved, the more it felt like I was reclaiming parts of myself I thought were gone forever. By the end of the first week, I made it to the lake's edge, sat on a fallen log and journaled. Not for anyone else this time. Not for a blog or a book deal. Just for me. I wrote about the silence. About how I didn't miss the buzz of Marlene's voice filling space she never cared to listen to. I wrote about the way pain teaches you to negotiate with time. How every minute becomes a decision between giving up or inching forward. And one night, I dreamed of her again. But not like before. This time, she was standing in the kitchen of our old house, calling for me. Only this time, I didn't answer. I walked out the back door, barefoot, across the grass. And when I turned around, the house was gone. No fire. No drama. Just nothing. Like it had never existed. I woke up smiling. There's something sacred about solitude when it's not forced on you. I started chopping firewood, slowly, awkwardly, but it felt good. Like therapy. Each swing of the axe a reminder that I wasn't a fragile thing anymore. Maybe cracked. Maybe scarred. But not shattered. And one evening, I sat by the fire with a cup of tea and an old notebook in my lap and realized I had something to say again. Not just about Marlene. Not just about the pain. But about what comes after. Because surviving is one thing. But becoming someone new? That's the story worth telling. It happened in the most ordinary way. No swelling music, no lightning bolt epiphany. Just a glance. I was brushing my teeth one morning in the tiny cabin bathroom. The mirror fogged, the sink dripping, when I caught my reflection mid-turn. For a second, I didn't recognize the man staring back. He looked calm. Not healed. Not yet, but no longer drowning. I stared for a long while, toothbrush idle in my hand. My hair had grown in patches. My beard was fuller. My face wasn't as drawn as it had been in the hospital mirror all those months ago. My eyes, once rimmed with grief and sleeplessness, held something else now, something steady. I rinsed my mouth, leaned in closer, and said, "We made it." My voice cracked when I said it. Not from emotion, but from surprise. I hadn't said it out loud before. We made it. Not through the pain, not past the divorce, but through myself, through the version of me that accepted misery as normal, through the Everett who thought love meant sacrifice, even when the other person just kept taking. That day, I hiked farther than I had since the accident, up the hill behind the cabin where the old cell signal used to flicker in and out. I stood at the crest, wind slapping my face, phone buzzing with delayed texts and missed calls from the publisher. They wanted to talk foreign rights. Apparently, the man she left in the recliner had struck a chord beyond the Midwest. People in the UK were calling it a blue-collar heartbreak anthem. A woman in Sweden had written to say she read it twice and mailed a copy to her ex. And there, in the cold, I laughed. Not because of the success, though that felt surreal, but because somewhere out there, Marlene had to know. She had to see the articles, the interviews, the excerpts. Maybe she read the line where I wrote, "I loved her more than I loved myself, and that's how I lost both." Maybe she cried. Maybe she didn't. It didn't matter. Back at the cabin, I lit a fire and pulled out a blank notebook. Not the digital kind. Real paper. Something that could burn or survive, depending on how you held it. And I wrote a new title at the top of the page. After the recliner. Becoming someone she'll never recognize. Because that's what healing is, isn't it? Not revenge. Not even closure. Just becoming a version of yourself that would leave the old you. The one who begged, who crawled, who cried in silence. Absolutely speechless. By the time I left the cabin, spring had started to thaw the lake. The birches were budding, the air smelled like new beginnings, and I no longer needed to brace myself just to get out of bed. I loaded my things into the car slowly, not out of pain anymore, but out of reverence. That place had become more than shelter. It had been a cocoon, and I was leaving it changed. Back home in Elkhart, things were different. The mailbox was full, mostly fan mail, book orders, an offer from a speaking circuit. I stood there with my key in hand, marveling at how a man who once couldn't make it to the front door was now being invited to speak in New York, San Diego, even London. I turned my modest home office into a writing studio. Nothing fancy, just a good desk, an old record player, and a fresh stack of journals. My second book, the one I drafted in the woods, was set to release that fall. This time, it was about recovery. Not just mine, but others. It was filled with stories I'd gathered from strangers who had written to me, about heartbreak, abandonment, and yes, resilience. And then, one afternoon, I saw her again. Not in person, on a screen. A news segment on rising divorce rates in the Midwest. There she was in the background of a B-roll shot, walking alone into a strip mall nail salon. Hair pulled back, slumped shoulders. She didn't glow the way she used to. Or maybe, I just couldn't see it anymore. And the truth is, I didn't feel anything. No surge of bitterness. No smugness. Just peace. She'd gone her way. I'd gone mine. And for once, I wasn't the one looking back. That night, I cooked myself a full meal. Real food. Pan-seared salmon with lemon and rosemary. I sat at the table, my table, poured a glass of wine, and toasted the man who survived not just a fall, but the free fall afterward. To Everett, I whispered. The man she left, who didn't stay gone. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need her regret. I didn't even need an apology. All I needed was what I had now, the quiet joy of choosing myself, one painful step at a time. And in that moment, with the window open and spring sneaking into the room, I realized something. I hadn't just moved on. I had bloomed.